afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. We're a coalition of numerous autism advocacy organizations that represent tens of thousands of families. These families have had their lives torn apart by autism. We've come to discuss the continued failure of this administration to take steps to halt the injuring of children in this epidemic. We have 5 speakers today, all representing different organizations, who have come to be the truth for our children and autism. They'll speak briefly, and then we'll have a question and answer to follow. Our first speaker is Mary Holland. She represents the Elizabeth Burt Center for Autism Law and Advocacy. She's a researcher at NYU Law School and co-authored a paper titled Unanswered Questions. She's the co-author of the book Vaccine Epidemic and a frequent guest on Fox News. Please welcome Mary Holland.
We attended the first part of the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee's first session, having been reauthorized. And I have to say it was quite an extraordinary meeting. We listened to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Sebelius. We listened to the head of the NIH, Dr. Collins. We listened to members of Congress, and we listened to other government officials, all of whom talked about what a spectacular success the Interagency Committee has been. We heard about their incredible work. We heard about what an honor it is to serve. We heard about the progress that's been made. We heard about the pride they have in what they've done. We heard about their engagement and their honest and transparent work. We heard about their passion. We heard about their great ideas. We remarkably heard about the diversity of the current committee members, and we heard about their accomplishments. The only thing that session could remind me of in recent memory in public policy was when President George W. Bush congratulated the head of emergency preparedness on the hell of a job he had done in dealing with the crisis of the Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans. It was a disaster. The country saw what an extraordinary disaster it was, and here was President Bush living in a bubble with his bureaucrats saying, "Hell of a job, Brownie." That's what we heard this morning. They're living in a bubble. They're not dealing with reality. There have been no accomplishments. Under this committee, the autism rate has gone from 1 in 166 kids to 1 in 88 kids. And as Lynn Redwood, the only representative of the biomedical autism community on that committee, said, those data are 12 years old. The likelihood is that number is worse than 1 in 88. It's probably more like 1 in 44 or 1 in 38, like what we know is the case in South Korea. To me, what I heard this morning was the Autism Appeasement Committee. I heard that autism is static, that it's a lifelong condition, basically that it's not treatable, and I didn't hear one word about, or maybe 1 or 2, but I heard very little about prevention. Remarkably, I heard the V word in the whole morning once. One parent member mentioned the word vaccines. We all know that the autism epidemic is associated in the minds of the American public with vaccines, and people want answers. If they don't get answers, we know they're stopping to vaccinate their kids. People want and need information now about autism and vaccines, and this committee is showing no leadership on that fundamental issue. So, why are we here? I think IAC, unless it changes fundamentally, is irrelevant. I think it's not helping, it's harming, because it's giving us a false sense of things being done. So we wrote a letter to Sebelius in April when the rate of 1 in 88 was announced, and we asked for 6 very specific, relatively simple things for her to accomplish. We got no answer from her. We got a form letter response from Dr. Collins at NIH that did not respond to what we said. So let me tell you very briefly the very simple 6 things that we demand. 1, we want the administration to call autism a national health emergency. 2, we want this committee to have new leadership. Dr. Insel talked about accountability. Let's see it. Brownie resigned after the Katrina disaster. It's time for Dr. Insel to resign. 3, it's time for Secretary Sebelius to meet with representatives of grassroots autism organizations. 4, it's time to look at where the money went. Almost $1 billion over the last 6 years went to autism research. Most of it went to genetic research. Why? Let's look at what were the priorities and who made them. 5, there's no reason for the hepatitis B vaccine on the day of birth for all infants. That's the CDC's recommendation, that's the standard of care, and there's peer-reviewed science that shows there's an association with autism with that vaccine. Let's drop it. Let's drop it now. And finally, it's time for Congress to step up. Congress, we had 2 members here today, that's terrific, but it's time for them to hold hearings on conflicts of interest in federal autism policy. If we were actually to adopt these 6 things, we'd be farther ahead than we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we have Mark Blaxell representing the Canary Party. Mark is the father of an affected daughter, editor-at-large for Age of Autism, and co-author of a book titled the same. Mark often writes on autism, science, and policy issues, has published a number of articles, letters, and commentaries on autism in journals. Let's please welcome Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Mary, and I would just echo everything Mary said about the meeting today. It's really discouraging as a parent and a longtime advocate to sit and watch a group of people thank and congratulate themselves on a job well done. The autism community is not grateful for the work of the IACC, and we don't think they deserve to congratulate themselves on anything, any sort of accomplishment. I was most impressed listening to the conversation today by the comparison to a famous old book that I hope many of you have read, 1984 by George Orwell, and in that book there's a prominent device where the Ministry of Truth is the organization in the Big Brother government that actually publishes propaganda. Well, we were here in the self-proclaimed Ministry of Science, known as the National Institutes of Health, and the irony is, the tragedy is that these people pretend that they're rational, evidence-based, that they have expertise in science, and the best minds in the world are working in this problem, when in fact the practical effect of the work that NIH has done and the IACC has done over the last 10 or 20 years is to create a fantasy world where autism is a puzzle. It's interesting, it's complicated. It's an interesting question as to whether the numbers have gone up or whether we're just doing a better job diagnosing. This fantasy world is the official doctrine of the Department of Health and Human Services. It's a world in which science has become corrupted. It's no longer science. It's not about evidence. It's not about answers. It's about policy and what is convenient for government officials to declare as a pattern of action that they're prepared to take action on. Because the actions that they should take challenge the basis of what they've been doing for years and would call the question that they should not be congratulated for anything, that in fact the government is the cause of the problem and they need to stop what they've been doing and get out of the way. And I think a lot of us who have watched this for a long time, there was some acknowledgement of the frustration in the room, and some people voiced it. I think as one who's been active for a decade now, or more, you have to start asking the question, when will these people say enough is enough? Was it 1 in 166? Was it 1 in 150? Was it 1 in 110? Will it be 1 in 88? When will enough be enough that we actually need to take action as a nation? And I think part of that question is unanswerable because it's only the people in power who have formal positions of power that can make those decisions. One thing I'd like to say is that those of us who are affected in the community of affected and disenfranchised parents and affected individuals, that it's incumbent on us to call these people to account. We need to show up. We need to let them know that we don't agree, that we are protesting. We need to recognize and put it respectfully and professionally in their face that this is not just an intellectual problem, it's a moral problem. And when they deny the reality of the suffering of hundreds of thousands of individuals. They are making a moral choice